They said the Alpha's silence was cursed, but at night she heard him calling her name. The forest swallowed the road long before Celine reached the heart of it. What had begun as a well-traveled path from the lowlands narrowed to little more than a track of dirt and stone hemmed in by towering pines. Their branches arched overhead like the ribs of some ancient beast, blotting out the last of the daylight. The air here felt thicker, heavier, as though even the wind hesitated to cross into the Alpha's territory. Her horse's hooves struck the earth with muted thuds, each step pulling her deeper into silence. There were no birdsong here, no rustle of harmless creatures in the underbrush, only the oppressive hush of a land held in thrall to its master. They had warned her. The villagers at the border spoke of him with trembling voices and eyes cast down, as though saying too much might summon him from the shadows. They said their Alpha was cursed, that witches had stolen his voice in punishment for some unspoken crime, binding it in silence. They whispered that he no longer ruled his pack with words, but with fear, that his people followed him only because to disobey him was to invite ruin. Some claimed he had gone half-beast, his humanity drowned beneath the curse, that he prowled the black halls of his keep at night, eyes glowing like an animal's, searching for prey. Others muttered that the witches themselves still lingered, hidden in the woods, waiting for another soul foolish enough to cross into these lands. And yet, she had come, not for the villagers, not for the pack, but for the voice she had heard in her dreams, a voice no one else seemed to know, calling her name in the dark. Celine adjusted her cloak against the chill. Her pulse thrummed faster the deeper she rode, though she refused to let fear master her. Fear would do her no good here. What mattered was what she had been told in those dreams. Whispered words carried on a voice aching with loneliness, a voice that spoke her name as though it were salvation. She pressed forward. The last slant of daylight slipped between the trees when the first howl rose in the distance. It wasn't wild. It wasn't the call of some nameless wolf. It was deliberate. A warning. The sound rolled low and long, like thunder caged in a throat, echoing through the trees until it shivered down her spine. Her horse startled beneath her, ears flattening, but she steadied it with a firm hand. Another howl answered, nearer this time. Then silence. Celine swallowed against the tightness in her chest and urged the horse on. If the wolves wanted her gone, they would have already struck. Their restraint was unsettling, almost calculated. At last, the trees thinned, and she reached the crest of a hill. Below lay Blackthorn Keep. The fortress loomed above the valley, its towers scarred by fire long past, ivy clawing up walls left to crumble in shadow. Smoke did not rise from the chimneys. No torches burned at the gates. It looked less like the seat of an Alpha than the lair of a ghost. The villagers had not exaggerated. This was no place of life, but of silence. Yet the gates stood open, not in welcome, in warning. Celine's breath caught as she saw him. A figure stood just within the threshold, broad-shouldered, cloaked in black fur-lined leathers, still as the stone walls themselves. The dusk caught in the strands of his dark hair, and when he lifted his head, she saw the storm gray of his eyes, cold, unyielding. Yet there was something there she couldn't name. The Alpha, Caius. The sight of him was enough to explain the villagers' fear. He was a man who needed no words to command, no roar to terrify. The very weight of his presence pressed on her chest until she struggled to draw breath. And yet, there was no cruelty in his expression, only silence. His gaze locked with hers across the distance, and though his mouth did not move, though his throat bore the faint white scar where a blade, or curse, had marked him, Celine felt it. A pressure at the edge of her mind, a cry smothered before it could break the air. A voice struggling to be heard. She could not look away, even as her horse shifted uneasily beneath her. Her heart thundered, not only with fear, but with recognition. The same weight she felt now pressing against her chest was the one that had haunted her dreams. Caius did not move as she guided her horse through the gates, nor did he offer greeting or challenge. He only watched her with that storm-gray stare until the shadows of the keep swallowed her whole. The keep of Blackthorn was not a place of welcome. Celine had known that before she entered, but standing now within its halls, she felt the truth in her bones. The stone walls seemed to drink in warmth, their shadows long and heavy. Tapestries that had once been rich with color hung faded and frayed, their edges gnawed by damp. The silence here was not the ordinary hush of nightfall. It was older, deeper, as though the very stones remembered the curse and bowed beneath it. A servant led her through the corridor, his steps quick, his eyes never lifting from the ground. He spoke only once, at the threshold of her chamber. "You will remain here until the Alpha calls for you." The words were little more than a whisper, as though spoken too loudly they might echo into the wrong ears. Celine stepped inside. The chamber was simple, cold, but not unkind. A fire smoldered low in the hearth, its light chasing the worst of the shadows back into the corners. Someone had laid out bread, fruit, and a jug of water on the table. It was no royal feast, but it was care, and for a man said to be savage, it surprised her. She turned toward the window. From there she could see the courtyard below, ringed in broken walls and silent towers. Wolves moved in the gloom, not wild, but tethered by the bond of pack. Their eyes glinted in the firelight, pale as stars. When they looked up, it was not at her, but toward the keep itself, waiting, watchful. Then she felt it again, that weight, that pressure at the edges of her mind. Her breath caught as she turned and found him there. Caius stood just inside the doorway, silent as shadow. She hadn't heard him enter, hadn't even felt the door open, and yet he filled the chamber as though the air had bent to make space for him. Up close, he was more than imposing. The breadth of his shoulders nearly eclipsed the firelight. His cloak hung heavy with wolf fur, his hands scarred and strong. But it was his eyes, storm-gray, fixed on her with an intensity that burned hotter than any flame, that rooted her in place. Celine's throat went dry. The word caught. She steadied herself. "Thank you for the chamber." He didn't move, didn't nod, didn't lift a hand, only watched her in silence. It might have felt like judgment, like the villagers had warned, a beast measuring its prey. But she saw something else there, a fracture, a longing. The silence was not cruel, but desperate. Her instinct urged her to fill it. "My name is Celine." Her voice was steadier this time. She lifted her chin, meeting his stare without flinching. "I know who you are. I came because—" She stopped. How could she explain that she had followed dreams? That his voice, unheard by anyone else, had led her through miles of wilderness and shadow. To say it aloud felt like madness. But she thought she saw it, the flicker of recognition in his eyes, as if he already knew. Caius moved then, not toward her, but to the table. He broke the bread, set half upon a plate, and placed it within her reach. His hands were deliberate, precise, the gestures of a man accustomed to commanding without sound. Then, without waiting for thanks, he turned and strode back toward the door. He paused only once, his hand braced against the wood. His head tilted, just slightly, as though listening for something she could not hear. Then he was gone. Celine exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her heart still beat too fast, her palms damp against her gown. Yet beneath the fear was something stranger. A pull. A tether invisible, but undeniable. That night, sleep claimed her swiftly, and once again the silence of the keep broke. She dreamed of him. But this time, it was not only her name that passed his lips. His voice was raw, roughened by years of silence, but it carried words she understood in her bones. "You came." Morning came with mist coiling low across the courtyard. Celine woke to the chill of it seeping through the stone walls, her breath a pale cloud in the dim chamber. For a moment, she lay still, her mind caught between dream and waking, the echo of his voice still trembling in her bones. "You came." The words had been simple, but their weight was immense. Not command, not accusation. A confession. She rose and dressed quickly, smoothing her cloak against her shoulders. If she had expected to be left in solitude, she was wrong. The moment she stepped beyond her chamber door, she felt eyes upon her, the pack. They lingered in the corridors and courtyards, men and women with the same storm-gray eyes as Caius, though dimmer, dulled by suspicion. They moved with the restrained power of wolves holding themselves in check. None spoke to her, none offered welcome. But they watched. Their silence was not like Caius's. His was weighted, commanding, desperate. Theirs was sharp-edged, a blade drawn but not yet swung. Two young men in the training yard lowered their voices when she passed, though the words still carried. "She'll weaken him. They always do. She's no mate. She's bait. Don't you smell the witch's touch on her?" Celine kept her chin lifted, refusing to let them see her flinch. But the words sank deep. Already, she was marked as an intruder. Later, in the great hall, she felt the weight of their judgment more keenly. Long tables stretched beneath vaulted ceilings, though most sat empty. What few pack members remained kept their distance, their eyes flicking between her and the dais where Caius sat. The Alpha's presence filled the hall, though he spoke no word. He didn't need to. The scrape of his chair against the stone, the deliberate stillness of his hands, the storm in his gaze, all of it held the room in thrall. When Celine entered, conversations hushed to a whisper. Caius looked at her once, his eyes steady, unreadable. Then he gestured, a simple motion of his hand, and a servant set a place for her at the long table. Beside him. The air thickened. No one challenged his silent command, but the weight of their suspicion pressed harder. Celine sat with as much grace as she could muster, though her heart thundered in her chest. She ate little, her throat too tight, every bite tasting faintly of ash beneath their stares. Still, Caius remained steady at her side, as though her presence was not an intrusion, but a fact, something the pack would have to accept whether they wished it or not. Yet in his silence, she sensed his own tension. A man at war not only with his people, but with himself. That night, the dreams came stronger. Celine found herself standing in a field of shadow and pale firelight. The air shimmered, unreal, and across the distance stood Caius. Not cloaked, not guarded, but bare in a way his waking self could never be. His eyes met hers, and when he spoke, his voice carried like thunder after drought. "They fear me." The sound of it made her heart ache. "They fear what they do not understand," she answered, though her voice wavered. "But I heard you. I knew it was not fear that bound me here." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming even in dream. "You came because you heard me. No one else has. Not once in all these years." Celine's breath caught. Why me? For the first time, something broke across his face. Not the cold silence she had seen in the hall, but a crack, grief, sharp and staggering. "Because you are mine." The words seared through her, and she woke gasping in the darkness of her chamber. The fire had burned low, shadows crawling across the walls. But the echo of his voice clung to her still, raw and undeniable. She pressed her hands to her face, trembling. "Fated mate." The phrase whispered through her mind, one she had scarcely dared to believe. And yet, deep in her chest, she already knew it was true. But if she was his salvation, she was also his weakness, and the pack would not forgive her for it. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of silence and suspicion. Celine moved through the keep under watchful eyes, every step weighed by the pack's mistrust. Caius remained near, though he seldom approached her openly. It was always the same, a shadow in the corridor, a presence in the courtyard, a gaze across the hall that bound her more tightly than chains. And each night the dreams came. In them, Caius spoke as though the curse had never touched him. His voice carried the raw edge of longing, the pain of years spent unheard. Through his words, she pieced together fragments of the truth, how the witches had come, how their spell had severed his voice from his body, how he had watched his pack dwindle, powerless to call them back. But it was not only grief he gave her. He told her of the rivers that cut through his land, of the hunts beneath silver moons, of the stars above the pines that never seemed to fade. And sometimes, just sometimes, he whispered her name as though it was the only sound he ever wished to keep. Yet the closer they drew in dreams, the heavier the air became in waking. Shadows thickened in the corners of the keep. Fires burned low, sputtering against sudden drafts of icy wind. Wolves whined uneasily at the gates, their hackles raised toward the trees. It began one evening in the great hall. Celine sat near Caius at the long table, her plate untouched, when the torches flickered violently. The flames guttered, bending as though caught by an unseen breath. A hush fell across the room, deeper even than the silence that usually haunted it. Then the voice came, not aloud, not like Caius's in her dreams, but within her mind, cold, sharp, unmistakably foreign. "The girl does not belong here." Celine's heart stuttered. Her gaze swept the hall, but no one else seemed to hear. The pack went on eating, murmuring, shifting uneasily at the torches, but their expressions betrayed no sign of intrusion. Only Caius. His head lifted, his eyes snapping toward the shadows at the edge of the room, his jaw clenched, his scarred throat working as though he might force a growl past it. The mark of the curse burned faintly against his skin, red and raw in the torchlight. Celine gripped the edge of the table. The voice pressed harder, cold as winter wind. "He is ours. His silence is ours. You cannot unmake what we bound." Her breath came ragged. She wanted to cry out, to warn the others, but no sound left her throat. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the voice was gone. The torches steadied. The hall exhaled, but the weight of it lingered. That night in her dreams, Caius stood closer than ever before. His hands trembled as he reached for her, though his voice was steady. "They know you are here." Celine's chest ached. "The witches." He nodded once, slow. "The curse stirs when you draw near me. They fear what it might break." She swallowed hard. "Then what do we do?" His gaze burned into hers, storm gray as the waking world, but alive here in firelight. "You stay, no matter what they whisper, no matter what they show you. If you leave, they win." She wanted to protest, to tell him the pack already hated her, that the witch's shadow was closing in, that she was only one woman against a curse older than stone. But when he touched her face, rough hands cupping her cheek with aching reverence, the words died in her throat. Because in that moment, she understood. The witches had silenced him. They had stolen his voice. They had chained his power. But not his bond. Not the mate they had never counted on. Celine woke with tears hot against her cheeks. The fire in her chamber had gone cold. Outside, the wolves howled, low, mournful, carrying into the night. And in the echo of it, she swore she heard something else. Laughter, faint, distant, mocking. The witches were near. The storm broke at dawn. Celine had woken unrested, shadows still heavy beneath her eyes from the witch's intrusion. She crossed the courtyard with her cloak pulled tight, the mist curling around her feet. The wolves lingered on the walls, their hackles raised toward the forest, as though waiting for something unseen. It wasn't until she reached the training yard that she realized the waiting had been for her. A dozen pack members stood there, steel glinting in the pale light. Men and women, young and scarred alike, their faces taut with suspicion. Their murmurs stilled when she entered, leaving only silence, sharp and expectant. Then one stepped forward. A woman with hair braided tight to her scalp, eyes flashing gray like Caius's, but without his restraint. She looked Celine over with open disdain. "You," the woman said, voice carrying through the mist. "The witch's bait." The words cut, though Celine forced herself to hold steady. "I am no witch." "You walk into our keep the moment the curse stirs," the woman snapped. "Our alpha bleeds fire at his throat, and shadows crawl the walls, yet you stand untouched. Why?" Others growled agreement. A man spat at the ground. "She weakens him. Even now he keeps her close when he should cast her out." Celine's chest tightened. She could feel their hatred circling her like wolves scenting blood. And then she felt him. Caius. He emerged from the shadows at the edge of the yard, broad and silent, his presence stilling even the murmurs. His storm-gray eyes swept the pack, then fell upon Celine. He did not speak. He could not. But the scar at his throat burned red in the dim light, and she saw the way his jaw clenched, his hand flexing at his side, as though fighting a voice that refused to come. The pack turned on him then, voices rising one after another. "Send her away! She carries their shadow. She'll bring ruin on us all." Caius's silence was a wound that bled across the yard. He stood tall, but without words. His people mistook his restraint for doubt. Celine's pulse thundered in her ears. She thought of the villagers who had warned her, of the torches that had guttered, of the witch's voice in her mind. She thought of Caius's hands in her dreams, trembling as he told her she was his. And then she did what none of them expected. She stepped forward, her voice carrying clear and sharp through the mist. "You fear me because you do not understand me," she said. "You call me bait, a curse, a danger, but I tell you this. I did not come to bind him or to break him. I came because he called me." The pack bristled, muttering, some snarling outright. The braided woman sneered. "Lies! He cannot speak!" Celine's gaze did not falter. "Not to you, but to me, yes. In dreams, across distance, through the curse itself, his soul has never been silenced, and I have heard it." A hush rippled through the yard, disbelief mingled with unease. She turned to Caius then, meeting his storm-gray stare. "You told me once that they fear you, that they always have, but I do not. I never will. And if they fear your silence, then I will be your voice." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to still. The pack watched, their eyes flicking between her and their alpha, waiting for the strike that never came. Caius did not move, but the look in his eyes, steady, searing, unguarded, was answer enough. The braided woman spat at the ground again, though her voice held less certainty now. "If she lies, it will damn us all." "And if I tell the truth," Celine said, her voice low but steady, "then it is the witches you should fear, not me." The pack muttered uneasily, their suspicion not gone but shaken. Some turned away, unwilling to meet her gaze. Others lingered, restless, caught between mistrust and doubt. At last, Caius raised his hand, a single motion, sharp and decisive, the kind that needed no words. The pack fell back. The confrontation was over. But as they dispersed, Celine knew it was not settled. Their eyes still burned with suspicion. Their whispers still clung to her cloak like thorns. She felt Caius's gaze on her again, heavy and unreadable. He gave no thanks, no sign of approval. But she felt it all the same in the tether that pulled between them. That night, the dreams returned. Darker now, shadowed by the witch's laughter. Caius reached for her, his voice raw with strain. "They will not stop. They will tear you from me if they can." Celine's heart clenched. Then they will have to go through me first. The keep grew colder in the nights that followed, though no frost touched the stones. Fires sputtered, shadows lingered too long, and wolves whined low in their throats as if warning of something unseen. Celine felt it most keenly in her dreams. Where once Caius's voice had been raw but steady, now it faltered, breaking under an unseen strain. His eyes in the dreamscape burned brighter, wilder, as though the curse had sharpened its claws upon him. "They are here," he said one night, his words a rasp of thunder through the silence. "Circling, testing. They will not strike until they are certain of you." Celine reached for him, her fingers brushing the shadow fire that limned his form. "Certain of me?" His jaw tightened. "You are the crack in their chain. If they can break you, they keep me bound." She woke gasping, the sound of laughter still ringing in her ears, high, cold, mocking. The next day, the whispers began. Not the pack's. Theirs had not ceased, but these were sharper, crueler, slipping into Celine's mind like knives. They came when she walked alone in the courtyard, when she washed her hands in the basin, when she passed beneath the hollow gaze of old stone statues. "He is not your mate. He is your doom. When his silence shatters, it will devour you first. Run, girl, run before he rips your throat." Celine pressed her palms to her ears, though the voices were inside, not around her. She would not yield. She would not run. But the witches were cunning. That night, when she closed her eyes, the dream did not bring Caius. It brought a shadow of him. Storm-gray eyes glowing with hunger, teeth bared, claws soaked in blood. He stalked toward her, lips curling though no words escaped. When he reached her, his hand shot out, seizing her throat. She jolted awake, heart pounding, the phantom sting of fingers still burning her skin. The fire in her chamber had died, though she swore she had stoked it before bed. For a moment she sat frozen, her breath clouding in the cold, until a shape shifted at the edge of the room. "Caius?" The name slipped out before she could stop it. The figure stepped forward, and her fear turned to shame. It was only him, not the monster from her dream, not a phantom. The Alpha himself, silent and watchful, his eyes fixed on her as if he had felt her terror from across the keep. Celine's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him everything, the voices, the illusions, the way they twisted his image into something monstrous. But his silence weighed heavier than words. He did not ask, and she could not find the courage to speak. Instead, he crossed the chamber, knelt by the hearth, and struck the fire back to life. Sparks leapt, flames licking once more at the cold air. Then he rose, gaze lingering on her for a long moment, before slipping away without a sound. When the door closed, Celine pressed her hands to her face. The witches had shown her what they wanted her to fear. But fear was not the truth. She knew it in her bones. The Caius she saw in dreams, the man who whispered her name as though it was salvation. That was no illusion. And yet, doubt had taken root. The pack felt it too. Accidents plagued the keep, a lantern falling where she had just walked, a wolf breaking free of its tether near the courtyard where she stood. None struck true, but each left murmurs in its wake. She brings shadow with her. She stirs the curse. She is not one of us. Celine held her head high, though each word pressed deeper. But in the quiet hours, she began to wonder if the witches' whispers had found more than her. If they had begun to infect the hearts of the pack itself, and if they could twist the truth inside his people. How long before they twisted it inside Caius? That night, when sleep finally dragged her down, she clung to one hope, that his true voice would find her again, cutting through the witch's lies. And when it came, it was hoarse, broken, but still his. Do not believe them. The air in Blackthorn Keep grew tighter with each passing day. Celine felt it in the way conversations hushed when she entered the hall, in the way eyes followed her down every corridor. The witch's whispers had done their work well. What once had been suspicion now fermented into something sharper. Even Caius could not shield her from it. He lingered always on the edges of her world, a shadow at the training yard, a silent guardian on the battlements. His storm-gray eyes met hers often, steady and unyielding, and though his silence frightened others, it steadied her. Yet she could feel it, the divide widening between him and his pack. The breaking point came at dusk. Celine had gone to the courtyard, her hands brushing the frost-tinged ivy as she walked, when a sudden motion made her pause. From the shadows stepped 3 pack members. The braided-haired woman who had confronted her before, flanked by 2 men with hard, suspicious eyes. Their presence closed around her like a snare. "You should not be here," the woman said, her voice low but taut with anger. Celine straightened her spine. "This is my place now, at his side." The woman's lip curled. "At his side? You mean at his throat? You think we don't see it? The curse grows stronger each day you remain. The witches laugh while our alpha weakens." "That's not true. Is it not?" One of the men stepped forward, his voice rough with accusation. "Torches die when you pass. Wolves bristle when you near. You carry their shadow, girl. And if he will not cast you out, then we will." Before she could react, the woman lunged, seizing Celine's arm. The others moved with her, rough hands grasping, dragging her toward the outer gate. Celine struggled, panic flaring in her chest, but their grip was iron. "Let me go!" "No!" the woman hissed. "We will end this before the witches bleed us dry." The courtyard rang with the scuffle. Other pack members gathered at the edges, watching with conflicted eyes, some angry, some uncertain, none moving to intervene. The whispers swelled like a tide. Then the growl came, low, resonant, filling the air like thunder. The hands on Celine froze. Heads turned as Caius stepped from the shadows, his cloak flaring with the wind, his eyes blazing storm-gray fire. The braided woman's grip faltered, but she did not release Celine. "She poisons you, Alpha. Can you not see it? She is the witch's lure." Caius's silence was more terrible than any roar. He strode across the courtyard, each step radiating command, and seized the woman's wrist. His grip forced her hand from Celine's arm, his strength undeniable. But when he opened his mouth, no sound came. His throat worked, scar burning red, but the curse clamped down like a chain. His silence stretched across the courtyard, and in it, doubt surged again. The woman spat, twisting against him. "See? He cannot deny it. He cannot even speak for himself." Celine's chest heaved, anger rising like fire. She stepped forward, voice sharp as a blade. "Enough!" The word cut through the courtyard, louder than any growl. Dozens of eyes swung toward her, startled. "You claim I am a witch's lure?" she demanded. "Then answer me this. Why does he stand for me? Why does he guard me, though he could have cast me out on the first night?" The woman faltered, but Celine pressed on, her voice steady, ringing. "You fear what you do not understand. You fear his silence, but I have heard his voice. Not the witch's lies, his truth, and I will not let you twist it into chains around him." Gasps rippled through the gathered pack. Celine's words hung heavy, undeniable. Caius's hand dropped from the woman's wrist, but his gaze never left Celine. In that storm-gray stare burned something fierce, something unspoken but unmistakable. The braided woman's defiance wavered. She looked from Caius to Celine, saw the tether that bound them, and her voice faltered for the first time. "If you are wrong," she whispered, "you will damn us all." "Then let me bear that weight," Celine said. "Not him." Silence fell, not the cursed silence of Caius, but the stunned hush of a pack uncertain of its own footing. One by one, the onlookers drifted back into shadow, muttering but not moving against her again. The 3 who had seized her stood rigid, torn between rage and fear. At last, they too withdrew, their eyes still burning with distrust. Celine stood trembling, her arm bruised where they had gripped her, but her voice did not waver as she whispered into the air between her and Caius, "I will not leave you." His gaze locked with hers, and though no sound passed his lips, she felt the words echo in her soul, fierce, defiant, unbroken. That night, when she dreamed, his voice came clearer than ever before. "They will break before we do." The night of the new moon fell heavy over Blackthorn. No torches lit the walls, no wolves howled in the dark. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Celine stood in the courtyard, the stones damp beneath her feet, her heart pounding in time with the silence that pressed on every side. Caius was beside her, tall and unyielding, though the scar at his throat glowed faintly, a red brand that pulsed with each beat of his heart. The pack gathered at the edges of the courtyard, restless shadows with eyes like coals, uncertain whether to draw blades or flee. Then the laughter came. High, mocking, layered, as if a dozen voices spoke through the same mouth. It curled through the courtyard like smoke, seeping into stone and bone alike. Alpha. The voice slithered through Celine's mind, sharp as ice. Silent alpha, caged alpha. Did you think one frail little mate would break our chains? The scar at Caius's throat burned brighter, his jaw clenching as though he might force sound past the curse. But no words came. The ground shivered. From the corners of the courtyard, shadows bled into form, tall, faceless figures cloaked in black fire. Witches, or what remained of them. Their shapes flickered, half real, tethered by the curse that bound him. One of them stretched out a hand, long and taloned, toward Celine. "Do you know what he is, child? He is silence. He is emptiness. His voice is ours, and when he dies, it will remain ours forever." The pack stirred uneasily. Some snarled, some stepped back, torn between loyalty and fear. Celine felt the cold touch of doubt at the edges of her heart, the memory of the illusions they had shown her. Caius's eyes gone wild, his hands at her throat. But then she looked at him. Caius stood firm, his gaze locked on her, storm-gray and steady. No beast, no monster, just a man bound in silence, waiting for her to believe. Celine drew in a trembling breath. "He is not yours. He never was." The witch's laughter split the night. "Prove it." The courtyard darkened. The pack vanished into shadow. The world bent, twisting into a place not of stone and mortar, but of nightmare. Celine found herself standing on blackened earth, the sky a churning mass of red and ash. Before her stood Caius, or what looked like him. His storm-gray eyes glowed too bright. His mouth curled in a snarl, and this time he spoke. "You are nothing. You are mine to devour." The illusion lunged, claws outstretched, teeth bared. Celine staggered back, terror flooding her veins. But even as she fell, something within her whispered the truth. This was not him, not the man who had lit her fire when it guttered cold, not the alpha who had broken bread for her hands when he could not speak, not the soul who had whispered her name across miles of cursed silence. She rose, her voice ringing clear against the false world. "No, I know who you are, and you will not turn me against him." The illusion shattered like glass, bursting into ash and smoke. When the world steadied, the real Caius was there, kneeling, straining against invisible chains that cut into his throat. His eyes blazed with anguish as he tried once more to speak, the cords in his neck standing out, the scar glowing like a brand about to split. Celine ran to him, falling to her knees before him. She cupped his face in her hands, her voice trembling but strong. "They cannot have you. Do you hear me? They cannot. You are not silence. You are not emptiness. You are Caius, and you are mine." The witches screamed, a sound like shattering iron. The chains around his throat flared bright, fighting to hold. But Celine pressed closer, her lips at his ear, her voice carrying the words he could not say. I claim you. I choose you. If this curse breaks me, then let it, but I will not let it keep you from me. And then, at last, the silence cracked. A sound tore from Caius's chest. Not words, not yet, but a growl so deep it shook the blackened earth. The chains split, fragments of red light scattering into the air. His voice had not returned, but the curse itself was breaking, and the witches shrieked as their tether frayed. Celine held him, her tears burning hot against his skin, as the nightmare world began to collapse. When the courtyard of Blackthorn returned around them, the witches' forms flickered, writhing in agony as the bond between alpha and mate glowed brighter than their curse. The pack stared in stunned silence, and Caius, still kneeling, his chest heaving, lifted his head at last. The sound that left his lips was raw, broken, but unmistakable. Celine. Her name. Spoken not in dream, not in illusion, but in the waking world. The courtyard still trembled with the echo of Caius's first spoken word. Celane's name hung in the air, fragile as glass, yet strong enough to shake the curse itself. The witches' shrieks had faded into the night, their forms scattering with the broken chains. What remained was silence, not the curse-born hush that had ruled Blackthorn, but the stunned stillness of a pack witnessing a miracle. Celine knelt beside him, her hands framing his face. His chest heaved, his lips parted as if shaping words he had long forgotten how to form. Storm-gray eyes locked on hers, raw and unguarded. He swallowed, voice hoarse, fractured, but his. They cursed me, Caius rasped, each word a battle, not for sin, not for blood, for fear. The pack stirred, whispers rushing like wind through the courtyard. Caius pressed on, his voice ragged but steadying with every syllable. They knew. A fated mate would come. That with her I could speak the vow, the bond that seals Alpha and Luna as one. The vow carries the true voice, stronger than their shadow, strong enough to break them. His gaze never left Celine's. They silenced me, so I could never claim her, so the bond would die unborn, and the pack would wither in silence. The braided-haired woman who had once defied Celine stepped forward, her face pale. All these years, you bore it for us, and we feared you instead. Caius's eyes flicked to her, then back to Celine. I bore it, because I had no choice, until her. Celine's throat ached with unshed tears. She had seen fragments in dreams, felt the weight of his silence, but hearing the truth in his own broken voice split her heart wide open. She drew closer, her forehead resting against his. Then let us finish what they feared. He stilled, the words sinking into him like lifeblood. The vow, she whispered. Speak it with me. Break it. The pack gathered tighter, uncertain, but none dared interrupt. The night air seemed to shiver as if waiting. Caius's rough hands closed around hers, his voice low, reverent. Celine, I claim you. As mate, as Luna, as the only voice I need. Her heart thundered. The witches' shadows clawed at the edges of the courtyard, desperate to linger, but she did not falter. And I claim you, Caius. Alpha or no alpha, cursed or whole, I choose you. If your voice fails, mine will speak for us both. The words struck like lightning. The scar at his throat flared once more, then split, not in pain, but in release. A surge of sound tore free, not a growl this time, but a roar that cracked stone and rattled the heavens. The witch's shadow screamed one last time before dissolving, ash scattering into the night. When the echo faded, Caius stood tall, his voice unbound. He turned to the pack, storm-gray eyes blazing, and spoke. I am not broken. I was never yours to fear. I am Alpha of Blackthorn, but more than that. His gaze fell back to Celine, his voice softening. I am hers. The pack fell to their knees. Some wept openly, their fear at last collapsing into awe. The braided woman bowed her head, tears streaking her face. Celine rose at his side, her hand entwined with his. And in that moment, Caius made his final choice. He looked at his people, at the broken keep, at the scarred land he had ruled in silence. Then back to her, the only light that had pierced the darkness. If being Alpha means losing you, he said, his voice steady now, whole, then I will lay it down. For I would rather live a man at your side than a king upon a throne of silence. Celine's breath caught, her heart breaking and mending in the same beat. She touched his face, tears glinting in the firelight. You will never lose me. Not now. Not ever. The pack's howls rose then, not in fear, but in fierce, unbroken unity. For the first time in years, the halls of Blackthorn echoed not with silence, but with life. And in the heart of it all, Caius bent his head to Celine, his voice no longer stolen, his words no longer bound. Mine. Her answer came without hesitation, spoken into the night. Always. If you like this story, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps this channel grow. Thanks for watching.